I go by Brianca Jay. I write, I read, I illustrate, and I really just kind of focus on like digital storytelling in general. So yeah.
So what got you into like being an author?
I've always been into writing. So I remember very early on, people would go out for recess, and I was like, I'm just gonna stay in and write a story or draw a picture. And I guess like over time, that just kind of never went away. Just continued to kind of write and draw pictures.
Where along the line, like, did you like think like, hey, I want to become an author? Like, was it something like you read and you were like, hey, I can do this too, or was it, I don't know, some sort of like life experience that happened?
I knew I wanted to be a writer really early on. Like I knew I wanted to write and tell stories probably by around 8 or 9 years old. And I started getting like really good reception from like adults early on. So like camp counselors, teachers, like administration. I would get like awards or try to get my stuff published. So I knew I had a gift like earlier. And I think that kind of helped me stay motivated, helped me kind of keep working at it. Just kind of knowing that like early validation, I think, kind of helps anybody kind of keep doing a certain craft.
No, I feel that. Cause I remember you told me like I think you like fell in love with writing like with your father being in jail. And
so
like,
yeah, so my dad, yeah, that's true. So when 1998, my dad went to prison and he had like a 10-year sentence, and communication like really changed between us. So what happened was he would start writing me letters, and so I was like, I'll write him letters, and we did that almost on a weekly basis for about like 10 years. And sometimes I think about like, I don't know what I wrote in those letters. It's probably very embarrassing, but yeah, from that I just grew a habit of writing, and I think that habit of writing, and I became better because I was always practicing. And yes, when I first really knew how letters could connect and communicate and like heal, right? Like the therapy about kind of letting your emotions out.
No, that's beautiful, and I thank you for like sharing that with me.
Oh, no problem.
But I don't know. I guess I want to get like more into like. I mean, you don't remember like anything like y'all wrote about, or like do you have like something like that stuck out to you?
We
wrote about.
And when we communicated, I think for my dad, he was still trying to figure out a way to father me. So he was still seeking out ways to kind of make sure that I had certain values and certain core beliefs. So a lot of the things he wrote about was kind of telling me, you know, how to carry myself like a lady and how to interact with the world around me. And I probably would write about him probably like teenage angst. Like I really treated, it's so embarrassing because I think like, oh my God, what does he know about me? Because I would just like treat it like a diary. Like a long time as a child, I was just like writing whatever I was feeling and sharing it. And I wasn't thinking about someone's receiving it, reading it, and kind of bringing me feedback. And so I think I was very vulnerable and very open. And in turn, he would like really try to guide me and help me understand how to like navigate the society I was in, even though he couldn't like be a part of it.
No, for sure. 1998 to 2008.
Yeah, from 1998 to 2008, he was in prison.
For real. And you were what, like 9 to?
So that's
19?
From 8 to about 18. So pretty much my whole adolescent childhood situation.
Right.
Yeah.
But like, what's that experience like? And like, I guess like the reason why I'm asking this is because, you know, like with this podcast, I'm trying to open people up to new experiences. Mm-hmm. And I know like, you know, most people, you know, haven't had like let's say a father figure or a mother figure in prison. Mm-hmm. And had to like exchange communication that way.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I don't know, I want to see.
Oh, we can explore it. It's not a problem.
Like how is that like as a child, like as a teenager?
I'll say it was very isolating. So first, I think it first began with confusion because it's a lot of shame around a person going to prison. Even though it was weird because it was like 98 and they were like locking up people with reckless abandon, but it was still one of those things that was supposed to be like a hush hush. So they would say stuff like, oh, he's on vacation, or he's away, right? Like just stuff that kind of made it very unclear what was going on. And then it would be confusing because he would always say, he was like, I'll be home in March. I'll be home for your birthday. So I think with a lot of time with me feeling like a confusion of like shame and like kind of like betrayal, because like that means every March I would feel like someone lied to me, right? But other than that, I think just far as coming to terms with like someone loves you but they can't like physically be here for you, I think that was really hard throughout just my childhood and my adolescence. Looking back, I think I've spent like a lot of time like very sad and like very like isolated. Like I didn't really share a lot of my emotions verbally or like physically with other people. I would write. I would just find new ways to like let those things be clear.
When you write, like what prompts you to write? Is it more so therapeutic? Is it like just expressing creativity? Is it?
I guess I always felt like no one was listening. You kind of have this feeling like you kind of get lost in the shuffle, right? And you're like, well, I guess I can explain it best. Like, you know how you'll be having a conversation in a group and you'll start your sentence and then people will keep talking, so you just kind of shut up. I felt like that a lot. And so when you're writing, you can fully get your feelings out without being interrupted, without anyone, what's the word? Like devaluing it. Like, oh, it's not that big a deal. You can just like express yourself however dramatic you want it to be, however silly, however little you wanted to make it or big you wanted to make it. You could do that without like the backlash or the lack of someone hearing you. And I think I always just felt I felt comforted by that. So I just continued to write. And then I didn't have that feeling of like, oh, I'm disrupting someone with my problems. I think a lot of times I would feel like I was bothering people.
I could see that.
Yeah.
I could see that. Earlier today, I was reading from Who Are We?
Mm-hmm.
And I could have butchered the title. But but like you were in an anthology called
Who Are We? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was reading about Minka, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know like some of your story. Like I know you were in like a different schools. Like you were in like a majority like Hispanic schools.
Right.
Like growing up, was that like you in that story?
Yeah. So Minka really represented that story. Is funny because it actually kind of happened to me that way. So Minka represented like one of those awkwardly, subtly racist type of moments that we all experience very early. I think a lot of times we think of racism like to be something really big, and we forget to think about the micro things that over time build up to kind of wear on our self-esteem. And so I just wanted to explore that with that character.
I would like to talk about like how that collaboration went down. Like how is his name Maynard?
Yeah, Trevor Maynard. Yeah.
So like how did he like decide who to pick? How did he reach out, or how did you reach out to him? Like
yeah, so he was having, and this is I really don't like personally know him at all. He's like, I think he's in the UK. That's the power of the internet. Like that's the power of the internet these days. Like I think he's way in the UK, but he does like poetry and short story anthologies yearly. And so this one was like the 2020 Cunningham Short Story Writers Awards. And so I think he had hundreds of submissions. And at first I was waitlisted. He was like, oh, we're thinking about your story. And I was like, oh, okay. And then maybe 4 or 5 weeks later, he's like, yeah, I really want to include this in my work. And so that was one of the ones he published. And so I just applied for the awards. I just kind of shoot my shot. I do it to everybody. I just throw all types of submissions in the bucket to see what happens.
This was like your first time being published? I mean, like in a book, or?
This was one of my first short stories to be published because I've worked academically for the most part. So I spent a lot of time working like with TSU. So I helped them write the Our Story series. they go over the history of the university and the different presidents and stuff. So I helped on certain projects similar to that and conferences and academic conferences. But I think for 2020, I wanted to really focus on getting back into like my own personal writing and doing things and projects that kind of catered to me. And so I started doing my short stories, and I started doing things that just kind of told the stories I wanted to tell.
What sort of stories do you try to tell like now, and like what? I guess like what's your style? Like what sort of stories do you like to tell?
The kind of stories I like to tell range. Like it is like a wide range. So I really get to explore a lot. So I do children's stories where I just get to have fun and be silly and play with like sounds and play with just words that'll enact a feeling and evoke emotion. But then I also write for adults too, right? So I write short stories and poetry and things of that nature. And when I do that, I try to explore like the true human condition. So I really try to be honest. And I think that's something you hear from a lot of writers. But because it's really easy to lie when you write. It's really easy to kind of embellish the truth and not be like very vulnerable. So I try to be as vulnerable and open and honest as possible when I do like my short stories and stuff, just because I want to really explore like humanity, the ugly and the beautiful, right? And I think that when I do that, I have the most connection with people. The more people reach out to me and feel impacted. And so I know I'm doing something right when I kind of feel uncomfortable with the release.
Earlier, well, the last two questions or whatever, like you mentioned that you like just shoot your shot, or you like to just throw your name in submissions.
Yeah.
So like I'm guessing, you know, you hear no a lot, you know, and like I want to know like how that impacts you, like hearing no, and like how do you like get over that and like forget it, let me just go again.
So yeah, as a writer, rejection is a part of the game. So I hear no way more than I hear yes. I may hear 4 yeses and hear 90 no's.
You know,
yeah,
like
as a writer,
you're
it's more common for me to hear a no than a yes. Like I'm more accustomed, and I expect to hear no. And so when I started submitting, I kind of tried to put it in my mind that I was going to hear no. So this a quote I love to remember from Forbes I read. It was like, the average person hears 39 no's before they hear a yes. So I read that and I was like, cool. So I got to submit at least 40 times. Like that it's just numbers. And I think that takes all the emotion out of, they said no or they said yes. It's just a numbers game. Like someone is bound to like what you have. You just have to make sure you give it like its best opportunity. But because I've heard no so much, I feel really confident now. Like I don't feel like it's nothing a person could say to me professionally or personally that would like break my spirit. Like there's nothing another person can do that can get me to lay in bed for a few days at this point. Like, oh, you don't like me? Oh, okay. Like, well, can I ask the guy behind you? Like, because you're just one person and there's like billions of us on earth. So, I mean, I'm not looking for everybody. I'm just looking for my particular audience.
Yeah, nah, it's tight. Because, I don't know, my dad, he has this thing of like, if you don't ask, the answer's always no.
Right.
But, you know, if you like put your name in the hat, like, or ask, you know, like, you could very well get a yes that will like change the whole circumstance. But if you don't ask, like, you just kind of just stuck in that same like spot, you know. So I get that when I hear you talk about this. But I want to know, like, what inspires you? Like, what are you inspired by today, or like it could just, I don't know, what inspires you?
What keeps me going and it keeps me inspired is just that there's so much more to do, right? It's so much more to say. Like, after I finish a story, sometimes I could by the time it gets published, I could care less to read it. Like by the time it reaches the audience, I've been done with it for months. And so I always have like more and more to say. Like I always have more to explore and more to talk about. And I think that keeps me inspired. Relationships are always a fun way. It's like just fun, right? They're always a good place to talk about and explore. You can always get a story out of that. Working with kids is incredibly exciting all the time. So I can just hear a sentence or a phrase in a weird circumstance. I'm like, oh, that's a story in itself. And so I think just life, right? Keeps me inspired every day.
No, that's pretty tight. All right, so I haven't read Fuzzy Socks yet. Honestly, I didn't remember it was out. But I was listening to your author meetup speak thing. And it was funny because you had mentioned the story about like Levi trying to get Levi to tell his grandmother like, hey, I don't really like socks.
Right, like I don't like it. Yeah.
So like that's cool that you get I guess you get some of your stories from like everyday life.
Yeah.
Like one of the things I like about like reading, and like you've talked about this before as well, but like reading has like the ability to like take your mind to a whole nother place, or like, you know, bring out a whole nother perspective of somebody's like life, or you know, if like I guess if you could talk about like that, you know, or like in different aspects of where reading has took you to another place.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, like reading is something that I find to be one of those things that expand our reality, right? So it's the idea that we are highly impacted and influenced by our environment. But every time we open a book, our environment expands just like a little bit more. And I think even now I'm to the point where I don't really want to read books from American culture. Like now I want to explore Russian literature and British literature and Argentinian literature, because now I'm exploring these cultures, these ideas, and I can bring it back and see how can I make the reality I have a little bit better, a little bit different. Because it's like traveling in a way. Like you don't know what you're missing until you get there, right? You don't know what you didn't know until you've read. And that's why I always champion the idea of just reading and exploring. And I think that's the most open-minded people you meet are the ones who are like consistently having a book in their hand.
All right, so like what's like your writing process like when you like, is there a way like you start, like is there an idea that kind of hits you? Like I mean, I know you talked about it a little bit already, but like when you're writing these stories, can you take me through like how it is when you start to...
I guess starting the hardest part of writing a story, right? Sitting down, approaching the page is probably the most difficult part of writing a story. I do that part first, naturally. Do that, no edit, no thought, just kind of scribble. I call it the shitty first draft. That means I have absolutely no hope that it's good. Like, but while I'm doing it, this isn't gonna be good. Like, this is the first one. And I follow like I follow the traditional like writing process that you learn in 4th grade. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's nothing wrong with it. To do your brainstorm and to do a first draft and then a rough draft and then revise, proofread, edit. Like, it's nothing wrong with that style. And in fact, that's kind of, y'all have about 5 or 6 drafts by the time I finish, because I'm like, okay, did I do this? And did I do this? And I almost make it like a checklist type of way of writing. But every time I do explore a story, I think about the last story and like, okay, what could I have done differently? And maybe I could say, I really want to flesh out my characters. I want to give them more emotion. I want to make sure that they feel more. And so that'll be what I'm focused on bringing out as I write that particular story. And I'll be adding that and fleshing those ideas out throughout the whole process. So I always kind of have a goal in mind. And then I kind of follow that very tried and true formula. It's not that sexy now.
Yeah. I know you have like a very like I would say it's like an out the box type of thinking, you know. And I remember you were telling me, I don't even know if you want to talk about this. I probably will include it, probably not. But I remember you was telling me like, after you stop being a teacher, like you want to like open up a coffee shop with like its own like bookstore and whatnot. Like, I guess like what brought about that like thought?
I want to do everything I've ever dreamed of. Like I want to pursue every thought that's come to me, right? So there's this kind of mantra I live by, which is like, if the vision was impossible, you never would have received it. And I've scribbled that everywhere, and even to the point that now it's on sweaters. And like that's kind of like how I want to do things. If the vision was impossible, you never would have received it. And meaning anything that comes to my mind, I can manifest into my reality, and so I will. And by the time I die, it'll be like, well, all right, it's time to go, because I've done it all, I've seen it all, and there's nothing left for me to explore. I want to kind of hit the ground, and it's like, what you got for me? I ain't got shit. I'm tapped out. Like, I want to be broke. I ain't got nothing else. Like, I used it. I gave it up. And I just kind of want to, just everything I can, everything that calls to me, like I want to try. Like, I don't have to succeed, but I want to try.
Yeah. I really like that. I really like that. That's amazing. I think I kind of have like a similar mindset as well.
Like, I want to try at least. Yeah. I think sometimes we get obsessed with like success. Like, I have to do this, and I have to also be the best at it, right? And it's like some things just I want to be the best at. But some things I'm good with the fact that I tried and I gave it my best rather than being the best.
I know I did want to ask you about being a teacher.
Okay.
And like how like that life is, and not life, but like how that like impacts you, and like I guess impacts the students, and like how you benefit from it as well. Like,
yeah, so I teach literature and I kind of write literature, so it kind of works for me. But also I get to approach the fundamentals of writing again, the fundamentals of reading again. And I just think that anytime you go back to the foundations of what you do, I think we all like to get to the part where it gets fancy and tricky, and I got wordplay and I'm fly with it. But when you get back to like the foundation of like what you do, like that's where like success lives. And so it's fun getting back to the foundation of what I do, and it's fun like reading a new story with them and watching where they kind of jump up and down emotionally, and thinking about these things and how I can explore these things and employ these things, because naturally what I write will also be received in some way on that level. So it's really awesome to see how an audience reacts to a piece of writing, what part makes them feel away, what words move them. And just for me, like teaching the writing process, teaching the reading process, it helps me be a better writer, a better reader.
Like as a Black woman, like do you feel, and I feel like you probably shouldn't even have to feel like this, but do you feel like you have to tell like certain stories, and like you have to maybe like...
I don't. I used to. And I think I used to get really caught up in that. I have to tell this story for this person. And I think a lot of times as writers, we think about we have to speak for our audience. And I think you're so wrong. I think you speak for you. You speak true to you. And then your audience will find you. You don't have to write for anyone. At the end of the day, everybody's gonna... That's one of the crazy things is I've seen people react to certain things I've written, and I'll be like, that ain't what I meant. But that's how you, like, the audience is going to take it, and now it's theirs. But when you're writing, it's yours. And you have to treat it as such. Because when I start saying I'm going to write for black women, that's when I start changing the truth. That's when I start editing the narrative. When I write and I say I'm writing for me, that's when I'm honest and vulnerable. And that's when it's going to have the biggest impact.
For sure. Yeah, nah, it's crazy. So you remember that book I let you borrow?
Mm-hmm.
Alright, so in there, you know, there's a particular part where he's going to like this predominantly white school in Mississippi, and this lady hands him a book, and like, I think it's Nikki Giovanni, but she was like, yeah, you need to start reading this. And then I think the lady had told him, like, you know, make sure like when you start writing, you write to and for your people, you know. And like, this is super paraphrasing because I actually have an interview with him.
Oh, cool.
You know, so I don't want him to be like, this is definitely not what the fuck it said. But yeah, no, it's like cool to hear, like, you know, like you have this other perspective of like, yo, I'm doing this for me, like.
I think it's too much fucking pressure to try to represent the entire black race. I'm exhausted. Aren't we all exhausted? Like, it's no way that I could speak for every black woman in this country. We have different classes, we have different socioeconomic statuses, we have different gender roles that we like to perform, different occupations, different neighborhoods and that we've grown up in. Like, there are so many variables. What type of fucking lunatic or narcissist would I be to think that I could even take on that task? Like, no, I can write, and the people that enjoy my writing is who I write for, whoever that person may be, right? Like, I see Mickey Kendall, like Hood Feminism. She wrote a book about what it's like to be a marginalized woman in America, but the majority of that book was written to educate white women. It's not that she's not, you know what I'm saying? Like, I read it, I enjoyed it, but I wasn't her target audience. But it was okay. I still appreciated the work that was being done, even if it wasn't something that was written for me. But I think Zora Neale Hurston, who is like one of the founders of the Renaissance, found herself blackballed and penniless when she died, but she held true to like what she believed in. And she wrote some of the most honest works in like American literature that didn't try to change the scope of who black people were. And I always thought that was really cool, because when you read her stuff, you hear the grammatical errors, you hear the colloquialisms, you see how black people joke and ha ha and he he. And I think about how she was really attacked because they wanted her to make black people seem like white people, but we're not. And so when I get to read her stuff, I get to enjoy the reality of what the Florida swamps was like, right? Rather than reading Gone with the Wind, which we all know was completely made up for a propaganda scheme. And so I'd rather just read the truth.
Yeah.